everyone! Hello, how are you? I hope you're doing okay. I hope everything is going great for you. If not great, at least, fine, right, whatever. I hope you're fine. I hope you're keeping yourself warm and nice and cozy and healthy in this weather. Today's a very special video. It is different than anything that I've ever done before, and I am very proud of it, and I'm very proud of myself for doing it. Remember recently I talked to you about a book and it made it to my top 10 of 2024. It was number 4 after Dante Alighieri, T.S. Eliot, and James Baldwin. She's up there, ladies and gents and toasters. She is up there, my guys. Yes, she is. So I got a hold of the author of one of my favorite books that I've read last year, and now actually one of my favorite books of all time, Home for the Bewildered by the incredible author Michelle Tobin. I want to say this now officially. I apologize for every time that I have misspelled the name. I don't know who the heck I thought I was talking to. Michelle Tobin. I don't know. Okay? I don't know. Every time I said it, it was different, and every time I said it, it was wrong. The entirety of the video, it was just like, oh, this book by Michelle Tobin. Who is that? So it's Tobin, okay? And I had the incredible, amazing chance to interview Michelle Tobin on a live that I had on my TikTok, which is right here. We had fun, we spoke about the book, we spoke about mental health, and we even spoke about how to break bad habits and how she and I had broken bad habits before, and the effects of everything when it comes to mental health. We had a lovely conversation. I also want to apologize about the sound and the light. It sometimes gets a little bit glitchy and the sound sometimes isn't as best as it could be, but it was alive and it was on my phone and it is what it is. Sorry, motherfuckers. Before I leave you with the actual interview, I want to thank Michelle Tobin again for acquiescing to doing a live. It was her first time doing a live, and I am immensely grateful for it, so thank you so much. Following Dorothy Morrissey, a shrink working at a hospital, and her the plethora of patients that we meet and get to fall in love with, and it goes from BPD to a Mississippi appendectomy to bipolar disorder to cases of abuse and CPTSD. It's incredible. It was one of the most amazing books that I've read depicting mental health, and again, after meeting the author, I can see why and how that was done. I had an absolute blast asking her all of my questions and seeing how absolutely amazing she is and how caring she is at what she does and the work that went behind the book. So get yourselves a cup of coffee or something sweet or whatever keeps you company and enjoy.
Hi, I'm old, so it took me a long time to figure this out. I did not have my camera or my audio on for TikTok, so it took me a minute.
Okay, as long as you're here. Hi, thank you so much for trying.
I'm sorry about that. I'm Michelle Tobin, and I live in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I work as a clinical social worker. And Home for the Bewildered is my first published book. I know you said you were surprised that this was a debut novel, but I've actually been writing for 30 years. So I wrote 2 other books and they were not published. Actually, I got my first book deal on my 65th birthday.
That's amazing. That's actually literally I have a whole bunch of notes here. That's my first question. It was, I legit cannot fathom how that was a debut. From the writing to the setting of each scene to the character progression and literally everything. I kept checking, even when I was finished with the book and I had reviewed it and everything, and I went to make like a video 2 weeks ago or something, I just needed to check again because I was shocked by it.
I love that. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about the authors that shaped you as a reader and as an author to be able to come up with something so incredibly well done as a debut.
Wow, I mean, I've been a lifelong reader, much like yourself. When I think of some of my favorites, I love, Jane Hamilton. I was just thinking about her last week on a walk, wondering, I haven't seen anything from her in a long time, but she was one of those people that you would ignore the whole world around you to finish reading her book. But that was like in the 90s, I was probably reading her. Another one I really like is a young woman, Amy Green, who wrote The Long Man. And I think she was pretty unknown. It's like, I don't know why she's not being read in every single high school for American literature. You know, that she's such a good author. Another, like, I don't even know if it's in print anymore, is Edith Pargeter, who wrote the Heaven Tree trilogy. That's book I also remember in the 90s, sitting in the stairs. My kids and husband were asleep, and I was reading at like 3 o'clock in the morning because I could not put that book down.
Speaking about books that one can't put down, that's exactly what you created.
Oh, thank you. I was hoping people would like it. I have been really gratified by how positive the response has been.
To be honest, it's not just about liking the book. I've read many arcs and many books that have been gifted to me, and that I've read a lot, especially after starting to produce videos and stuff about reading. And there's a difference between just liking a book and it being absolutely life-changing.
Wow.
And that was it for me. Like,
wow.
There's a difference, and you've achieved that. I think it's because it's a personal matter and it's about mental health.
Yep.
But everything else also needs to be taken into consideration, which is the writing, the setting of the setting, the progression, the narrative structure of the book. It was also perfectly well done, and I wanted to ask, how did something like that come about? How was the process of creating the book and going along with it?
If I have a theme that I want to write about, and I would say my other books were about this as well, it's people who are invisible to everyone else. So that's why I set it up that you're in Lansing, Michigan, which is a small town. It's the capital, but you know, it's had a lot of hits, I guess, to it. In a hospital, in a mental health ward, you know, kind of a 70s. In the 70s, you know, so I kept the scenery really simple, and you know, it's all about the inner life. And so that, I mean, I think that's my point is that there's so many people that don't get the attention they deserve, and writers too, because we pay a lot of attention to certain people, and celebrity and all of that, but everyone, if they're paying attention, has a rich inner life. You know, and people in general, I mean, as a therapist, I have that privilege to know, are really interesting if you're listening to their stories, you know, and to ignore people and their stories, I think, is at our peril. You know, so I kept the scenery simple because I didn't want it to be about that. I wanted it to be about people's inner life. And that's why my first two books didn't really get published, because that was the critique I would get. Well, you know, it's too interior, or you know, that kind of thing. I was being deliberate about that.
That's the point. That's what made it so beautiful. Speaking of celebrities and seeing mental health in different perspectives, using that, but just from the perspective of the people that are struggling with mental health and that are invisible. What is the importance of correct mental health representation in media? Because unfortunately, it is so rare.
I agree, and that was part of my other motivation. Is I hate when therapists are presented in media or movies, etc., as idiots. You know, you don't want to be a therapist to make money. That's for sure. You know, it is the drive behind wanting to be a therapist is interest in people and in their well-being. And so I do, and I think that there's no like correct mental health because we're all so different. But I think everyone, especially the more we see what's going on in this world, everyone would benefit from good therapy. because, to work on your own stuff. If you're working on your own stuff, you're healing the world. You're helping heal the world. And so the stuff that bothers me most as a therapist is what people do to each other, what we inflict upon others. That's the hardest part. The systems that hurt people, families that take their trauma and then visit it upon their children. It's like, and obviously world leaders who would benefit from therapy rather than inflicting it, making everyone else's life miserable. There's no correct way. There's no real normal. Everyone in the world, if you're alive, has had trauma. The best we can each do is take responsibility for our own lives and work on it. And that was the point of the book. Dorothy wasn't perfect, but she took herself and her clients seriously. So she was doing the work.
Even herself worked primarily on herself, which was amazing to see. She wasn't just a character of a therapist, which I see a lot in media, especially on TV. She was a person with her own issues and her own trauma, and worked on herself and progressed absolutely beautifully.
And that's the task for everyone, whether you're a therapist or a client. I like that most therapy programs, I hope anyway, I know mine did, we had to have therapy. We had to know what it was like to be in the client seat as well as in the therapist seat.
I wanted to ask you about more specific subjects that you've chosen for the book. We have a Mississippi appendectomy and borderline personality disorder. This one I'm gonna take super personal because I have it. And that was by the way, that was the cherry on top for me with this book, because BPD is not only one of the rarest disorders that is spoken about in media, but it's so villainized, and you've done none of that. Not only have you mentioned it, but you mentioned it just normally. It's a disorder, this is what it is, this is what it may look like. This is what it looks like for Marcella, for this character. And it was so well done. Why direct it to such niche, I guess, subjects when you can just have a general outlook on mental health?
Well, my expertise for it has grown since, but for the longest time was young adults. And so when I worked at a university, and part of our supervision is we didn't slap a label onto a student. If you have borderline personality disorder, if that's your diagnosis, we wouldn't say that when we were working with students. For one thing, a lot of young adults exhibit those behaviors because they're going through a lot and they don't know who they are yet, and they're trying to figure that out. But it also indicates that there's a history of trauma. So you want to treat the trauma. So someone with borderline hasn't learned how to calm their system down yet. Doesn't mean they can't, but it tells me that they've had some trauma, and so that the goal is to help them learn how to calm their system down, so to manage it. It's like any other mental health diagnosis. We all learn how to manage our emotions, our energy, our system, which is getting harder in this world because we're inflicting trauma all the time on people. The Mississippi appendectomy, that was one of those synchronistic moments. I was listening to the NPR, National Public Radio, and they had a piece on it. It was horrifying to hear about, and just gave me that piece to fill out Ruth's story. So that's why I put that in there. And that's also what happened with George. I read an article in the New York Times about not guilty by reason of insanity, how a lot of people will choose that and then they languish in the system for years when they could have, if they just served their time, they might have gotten out earlier. So, that's the kind of thing where when you're writing, those synchronistic moments, that help you. I knew I was on the right track when I heard these things out of the blue. So the same was true. I was looking, I had to get permissions for the quotes I was using, and I could not. I love Wendell Berry, but I couldn't find how to contact Wendell Berry to use some lines from his poetry that I wanted. So then I found the Rumi line, which was so perfect. And the translator, I reached out to him, and he reached back in 10 minutes. And I reached out to him through Facebook. So again, it's just, this is what's meant to be, and I listened to that.
Speaking about Ruth, we have Ruth and her singing, Thomas and his Obi. It's a relationship that I had as well between patients or people that have went through trauma and either other people or just objects. And it's a sign of so much understanding and so much research. And I want your opinion on the importance of that, because most people would just go past that and disregard it. It's just an insane behavior, which I've been told before.
Right.
But to me, reading it, I felt seen.
Oh, I love to hear that. I mean, that it's all I can really say is that I pay attention to my own experience. Like Thomas, my brother died in an airplane crash. That's why it's set in 1974, because that was the year he died in an airplane crash. And again, so then, all these other things were happening in 1974 that I learned about by choosing 1974 first. Thomas was born in Japan. Well, my brother that died was also born in Japan. So I just took these things and then ran with it and let the character kind of come to life. Ruth, the whole grocery store thing. I'm one of 12. My mother used to take me to the grocery store with her, and she'd fill up one cart and then leave me in a corner with it while she went around again to fill up another cart. So I just took little bits, and then created the character around that. And then I do, music therapy is a thing. So I really wanted, it's a valid form of therapy. I think it's really important for people who don't know how to express themselves, who lose their voice. Sometimes when I'm doing yin yoga or something, I'll do vocalizations to help me strengthen my voice. So that's kind of where that developed. But I have something in common with each character, and as a therapist, I try to find common ground with my clients as well, and so that I wanted that to kind of shine through.
It translated absolutely beautifully.
Oh.
Yeah. To me, she is the most interesting character in the entire book. Each one of them are immensely interesting and super well done. But Dorothy was just a light throughout the book, and I want to know the process of creating a character such as Dorothy.
She's named after my mother. My mother's name was Dorothy, so I started there. She probably looks like my daughter, kind of a combination of my mother and my daughter. So I had my daughter in mind when I was kind of, writing how she looked. She does therapy very much how I do therapy. I do all the things that I had Dorothy do, like swim. Swimming was key to my own mental health. And I'm very grateful that I found it probably before I would have been diagnosed with borderline. I know that when I was in college, had I gone to therapy in college, had I discovered or even knew it was available to me, that my behavior would have very much been indicative of borderline. But I consider the fact that I quit smoking and found swimming to be life-changing for me. And as a therapist, there are countless times that I would be swimming in the morning before I went to work, and I would be thinking either of an issue, my issue, or something, and then that would be what I would deal with all day long. So I wanted that, to be part of Dorothy's experience as well. And she's got her issues, but she's also working on her issues. all the Irish Catholic stuff, both my husband and I very much had those issues. You know, that we grew up, Dorothy's family is kind of a combination of my family and my husband's family. So we've heard all that stuff. So that's kind of how she was shaped. I wanted her to be a representation of how good therapy happens.
She was, and what it looks like, and what it is supposed to achieve, and the point of it. Because I think a lot of people lose the point of it. Someone asked how you quit smoking because they want to quit.
I put the pack on the counter. Now this was 40 something years ago for me now, but I put the pack on the counter where I could see it. And someone had asked me to go swimming, and I swam as a kid, and I'm like, sure, you know, and I'm watching her like, oh, she's so slow, you know, and then I jump in and I couldn't even get across the pool. So that motivated me, because I realized what damage I was doing to my lungs, but I gave myself the choice. And I'll tell you, the other thing is, I don't set a high bar. Even after 40 years of swimming, I always go to the pool saying I don't need to do very much. I'm just going to do a little. And then if I'm feeling good, I do some more. And I'm still feeling good, I do some more. And I also recognized how much better I felt. I did not know I had anxiety until I started swimming. And I started swimming, and then it calmed down. I'm like, wow, this is amazing, you know? And so that reinforced, quit smoking, start swimming. It doesn't have to be swimming. Anything will help. Walking, yin yoga now is, my pool closed during COVID and it hasn't opened back up. So I've been really bummed about that. So I've switched to yin yoga, which I think is really a valuable tool as well.
As long as you're active, he said, so find an activity that shows you how much damage it does.
Yes. And just honor yourself. You know, it's really about honoring yourself. I mean, doing the best for yourself so you can be the best version of yourself. And it's a lifelong process.
Now that I'm speaking to you, this is the first time having a proper conversation. It's insane the amount of things that I'm finding relatable, because for me that was running, and it is running, and then hiking and lifting, and it's anything physical that had helped tremendously in any manifestation of a BPD episode or a rage episode. Tremendously. It's helped the regulation, it's helped in regulating my feelings and my thoughts, and metacognition in separating the things that are actually logical, that are factual and happening here, from the things that I'm overthinking and letting my own disorder just taking them and running with them. It's really lovely to see the
Absolutely. And do it all. I mean, I lifted this morning. You can't see me, so I can't show you how much snow is on the ground here, but I can't get outside. I usually walk. I have a dog, you know. I mean, it's like the body keeps the score. I'm sure you've probably heard about that book, and the only way to release it is physically. If you can't be physical, that's where like the voice or the music therapy, like the vocalizations come through. But it's like we can't help what happened to us, but we can help what we do about it. And so being physical, at least for me, has been the most effective means of keeping my mental health managed. I don't know if, you know, the universe had a plan for me to be a therapist. I'm so grateful that I was able to discover that at a young age. And I listened, though. But writing is another one. When I look back at college particularly, and I think how messed up I was, because it was right before that my brother had died, I was doing certain things that were a reach for health. I was writing to him in my journal, and I was walking a lot. I was still smoking, I was still drinking, I was doing a lot of stuff that were not healthy, but I had a few reaches for health is what I call it. Do little reaches, and it'll eventually get you to valuing yourself and your health more than anything else.
It'll add up, for sure.
It adds up.
Yeah, 4 years ago, I You could have paid me and I wouldn't have woken up every morning just to run, just for
Yeah.
fun. Now
But then you realize how good it feels.
exactly, it's freeing, it's liberating, it's freeing, it feels good, and
Yeah.
it's addicting.
Yes. You realize you need it. My dad used to go to church every morning, like 6 a.m. mass. And I thought, oh my God, he's such a saint, you know. And then he would come home and he'd make us breakfast. But then I realized one day when I was swimming, like, oh, he didn't go to church because he needed to. He went because he needed to. You know, like that was his way of man. He had 12 kids to provide for, you know. I mean, he needed to get that quiet time. And so he did, you know. And that was my swimming. Swimming was my church. And actually, I think I put that in the book, didn't I?
Yes. You put that when her fiance kept nagging her about her swimming and her avoiding him and going to swim instead. Which is the point, like she needs that time to regulate to be able to speak to you.
Yes. Well, and you know, speaking of Kenneth, so I like my son actually helped me with that. Like he was like, you know, you don't have to make him into a bad guy. You know, it's more like they're just not compatible. Like, you know, it's nobody's fault. It just, they were from two different worlds and she could not overcome that. So that's how I wrote it. You know, it's like I didn't want to make him evil or anything, but I knew from the beginning they weren't gonna make it.
I didn't.
Oh, is that right? I probably just blew the end for people who haven't read it either.
It was almost the middle to the last half of the book where I was just like, you know what, I don't think this is gonna work out.
But a lot of that too was very 70s, you know, his assumptions that she had a PhD for crying out loud, and he would just thought that, you know, his career was more important. Like it wasn't because it was just that's what the world told us.
I feel like he didn't see her as a doctor even. Whenever she goes to his events with his group and people, they would just be like, oh, how cute, therapist.
That's exactly how we were treated at that time, you know, and even longer than that. When I think, you know, what we're going through right now, politically in our world, that in 1974, that was the first time women could get charge cards here and buy a house on their own. I mean, that seems crazy, doesn't it?
I want to ask about the play of religion against one's psyche and how you manage to remain unbiased, because I could feel the anger throughout every POV that included George and Dorothy. I could feel the resentment just specific to him. With Dorothy, there's also feelings when it comes to religion and everything around her, but nothing against religion specifically. How was that managed? I cannot fathom it.
Well, I would say I'm not sure I have managed that. I don't know if I wrote a poem, I put it on Facebook called Eve's Pissed. And part of that was tapping into the fact that I realized how angry I am. The rage that I think most women feel, because we all can go back to some point in time when we were either harassed or called a name or put down or touched when we didn't want to be or looked at in a gross way, or, you know, we can all come up with something. So I realized just how angry I am. And I immediately went to my energy person and said, I got to channel this. I don't think it's disproportionate. And I think that Dorothy also was that way, felt that anger, because you couldn't acknowledge it. You couldn't allow yourself to be. That fight she gets in with the guy in the first chapter, you know, those kind of insults happened all the time. She didn't know that she was angry. I think she was. It's easy to understand why. Any female can understand why.
Yeah, and we could see that in small details. I think, for example, she would go completely nonverbal with her fiance, with Kenneth. and she would try to express to him how she's feeling, and then she would give up multiple times, which is so relatable. It is so relatable. Yeah.
They just don't get it.
He wouldn't get it.
He just didn't get it. You gotta be a woman at any time and being told that you're not, that you're less than. I don't know. The hubris behind thinking that only certain people are made in God's image is always been like mind-blowing to me. Like, how do you question that God didn't make a person just as they are? I don't care what kind of person we're talking about. If you believe in God, then you got to believe that God intended to create people like God has, which is a very diverse, you know? Yeah. And to say that one group is better than another, again, I'm speechless. How do you do that? So I hope that Home for the Bewildered gives people empathy and understands that every person has a story. Every single person. And put yourself in their shoes for 1 minute, and the world will be a better place.
Even if you can't put yourself in their shoes, at least take a step back and realize that these are people as well.
Just allow them to be. Yeah.
This is a person with parents and siblings maybe, and issues and trauma and their own life.
And, you know, when we don't do that, we're not growing either. You know, and when you're trying to oppress anyone, you're also stunting your own growth. Because you're not interested in learning about somebody. That's what I'm hoping comes through. And then also some hope. I think Dorothy is in her very deepest part of her, she's a hopeful person. Even when life isn't going her way, you know, it's that there is hope. I feel like that. I used to joke that I was a purveyor of hope from the hopeless.
I mean, that's BPD though.
You know. Now I've owned my hopefulness, but there have been times, you know, when you're just hopeless and you're still trying to make somebody else's life a little bit better. You know, it's like, I think that's what she was trying to do.
Every character that now that I'm thinking about it, because they've been through so much, and Ruth has been through like unimagined horror, physical and emotional, and abuse through everyone around her husband, her mom, her siblings, literally everyone, yet still she comforted people.
A beautiful soul.
Yeah, and Marcella had found such a motherly figure with her. So did Thomas, and so did George, even though they got super annoyed by her singing, but they loved her nonetheless, and so did I.
Oh, my favorite part of the book is when Thomas and Marcella do Ruth's hair and makeup.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of my favorite scenes, really, is, you know, how they came together for her. And even George did. He sat out and kept an eye on her.
Yes. My favorite scene is when Dorothy created a tea. What is it called? A tea ceremony.
Yeah, tea ceremony. Yes.
That was so heartwarming, and it's just that's what therapy should be like.
Yes.
It shouldn't be going from this is what the book says, so I'm gonna go by it, disregarding anything this patient tells me and is doing and saying and showing me. She just created a safe space for Thomas, and that created a safe space for me as a reader. So that was amazing.
Awesome.
to see. Yeah.
I mean, she was listening to him, and that's where she got her cues. She listened to him, and I participated in this is back in the 90s. I knew this woman who was like, she did iris analysis and meridian work, and she lives in the middle of the woods. If there was a nuclear event, I'd go find her because she knows how to survive. But she also did these Japanese tea ceremonies, and it was super cool. So then one of my colleagues at the university, I was doing like a group therapy with students, and he came. He was a big tea. He was, I forget what they call him, but he knew how to do all that stuff, and so he put us through one of those. So that's where that came from. That was very cool.
But now
listened to him with that, but he's been practically yelling about his Japanese heritage specifically, and through his obi, and the fact that she provided that, he's been yelling about that. Little chapter 1,
Yeah.
he's calling for his obi, and being angry that people are misnaming his obi and just calling it a robe and calling it a sash and this and that. So the fact that she was the only one, the first one that not only had listened and corrected herself, but created that safe space. That was my favorite.
Thank you.
Favorite scene in the
Yes.
entire book.
Really, she really heard him and saw him. And that's what's important.
And let him understand that he's seen.
Yeah.
I mean, the relationship. Speaking about the relationship between Dorothy and all of her patients, especially I could especially feel it with Thomas. He's so loud. He's so out there. He's like a Freddie Mercury of the psych ward. I loved him. Speaking of that, how was such a relationship, a tender relationship created in media? In my experience, it's either romanticized, it's either villainized, and it's either just warped. But this was perfect. Even the parts where they kind of fell in love with her or became truly like they idolized her, that was natural and normal to happen. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I wanted it to be real, real as how actual therapy is done, and obviously it was in fiction, a fictional form, and not every therapist, just like patients, not every therapist is the same. Some prefer CBT. I'm more of an insight-oriented. I wanted to be a Jungian analyst, but I couldn't afford it to go and get the training. So it's like every therapist brings their specific self to therapy as well, But you can identify, my husband is a psychologist and he teaches counseling skills, and he did, like, his students identified all the different techniques that Dorothy uses in the book. When you do therapy for a long time, it just is natural to do it. I didn't want it to be romanticized. I didn't want it to be made to look foolish. I wanted it to be, this is what therapy looks like if you have a good therapist. And if you don't, go find another one.
This is from my own experience being in a ward and having multiple therapists and trying to find an actual good one. That's literally it.
It's really gratifying to me to hear young people resonate so well with it, because I'm old. So it's like, and it was set in 74, and yet, I've had a lot of young people reach out and say how much they liked it.
We need good it's incredibly hard to find. I told you, it's either, especially BPD, so villainized.
Yeah, it is so villainized, so misunderstood.
Yes.
And I wanted that to come through too, through Dorothy. It's like, when you hear about, say, borderline personality disorder, that strikes the fear of God in your heart. Oh, well, that person's got borderline personality disorder. It's like, oh dear, I don't want to see that person. Then you see that person and they're like, you love them. It's like you can't, when you listen to the labels, you don't meet the person. And I really wanted that to come through. Doesn't mean the therapist isn't going to be anxious about it, because they're people too, and so that's why I really wrote that about Thomas, when she's hearing him scream, and it's like, oh my God, I got to go deal with this person. And then she deals with her own anxiety and manages that, and she meets the person. Not always easy to do, but can be done. And some people are better at it than others. One of my reviewers worked with people who've been tortured. Like, I hear that and I'm like, oh my God, I could never do that work, And I'm amazed. And I'm not surprised he couldn't do it, because he's that gentle, quiet type soul. We all have different areas of expertise too.
My own therapist, which has been incredible with me, it took me years to find him, and trying a lot of other therapists that were really bad. And had I not had the knowledge or as little of the knowledge that I had back then, I would have just acquiesced it. I would have just thought, this is it. I mean, I'm so grateful to be able to have the privilege of getting knowledge and being informed about what it actually is supposed to be like. And what I have isn't some poisonous thing. It's a disorder that stems from trauma.
Exactly. And it can be healed.
Yes, it can be treated and regulated. And I know that because I do that.
Yes. Like any other mental health issue, that's what it takes. The hardest one, I think, to treat really is narcissistic personality disorder.
I agree, ma'am. Yes.
Because that usually, and I'm saying usually, I'm not saying it's across the board, but somebody with actual narcissistic personality disorder doesn't think there's anything wrong with them.
Yeah.
So they don't think they need to get therapy. Everybody else needs to get therapy. So, and that seems to be on the rise. I hear about it a lot.
But even though it's still, there's still hope. Yeah.
You find the right person who can understand you and hear the pain, because that's the thing. The issue with narcissism is that's like an empty well that can't be filled up. And there's definitely trauma behind that. That doesn't just happen for no reason.
Even if you're someone that is in close proximity to a narcissist, an actual narcissist, because the word is just thrown around, if you have the knowledge behind it, or a little bit of the knowledge behind it, you'd be more understanding. And as long as you protect yourself, I know as long as I protect myself and I keep bringing forward the understanding behind it and stuff like that, it doesn't affect me as much.
Right. Boundaries are really important.
What do you think would have happened to Dorothy had she not had the talk with Kenneth? This is a very specific character-wise.
Only one person has understood the Dalkin shield reference, which is definitely historical. I mean, that, for my generation, that made us terrified of IUDs, because that was happening to people who had them. So she was in so much pain, and she did not know what was happening. So she just thought she was anxious. I think it's that intersection of body and mind all happening at once, and all the stuff that was going on for her and her family. He wasn't a bad guy, but he did not understand. He had a privileged life, and he just was able to move through life without having to think about it. He never really understood what happened to her. He left before he could find out.
It was also very important, I think, to me, to have the breakup, and in such a dramatic way, and to have that effect on her so she can heal and not have her end up in a romantic relationship again.
Yes.
She was just herself, living and alone, and having a friend, actually, an unexpected close friend. I thought that was very, very important.
Yep. It's like we aren't women. I wanted that too. Yes, I agree. We don't become whole by being with some guy. You have to be whole first. You have to work on your wholeness first. Everybody should, female or male. You don't look to the other person to save you or to make you whole. That's your job. We each have to do that ourselves. I wanted her to be seen as that, like doing her own work and leaving that question mark open about whether she meets somebody else.
It wasn't just an open-ended story, a book. This is a novel from A to B. It was just a piece of life, and I thought that was really well done. Because before you mentioned the assault that had to do with church, when we spoke about women and the things that we have to go through that are unseen and disregarded, but you made that from George's POV. That was his story, his main story. I loved that so much.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah. It's so disregarded when it comes to men. So I love the fact that you had George through that.
But where do they go with it, except to anger? When the only emotion men are allowed is anger, what is a guy supposed to do who's been abused? I have worked with abuse victims and, from church abuse. And I thought, was I too extreme in writing that? And no, I wasn't. And that's the sad thing. It affected a lot of boys as well as girls. And that has to be healed.
There were specific scenes where the perpetrators had literally not only no interest in the girls, the little girls, but they were aggressive towards them, hateful towards them. And that, reading that and them preferring the boys, it's disgusting. So that was amazing writing.
Thank you. I mean, I feel like I definitely experienced that, and I know a lot of girls did, just by the fact of being girls. No other reason.
And a lot of boys, without even having the chance or the knowledge that, hey, this is something I can actually cry about, and that's okay.
Yes. I hope we've made progress in the world with that. I think there's still a lot of healing to be done, but I hope we've made progress. I think we have, but it's still, it's disheartening to see how we still inflict so much pain upon each other for no reason. I don't know why humans behave how we do, but that trauma just keeps getting passed from generation to generation.
The generation that it falls on, the ones that have to break it, that have the knowledge behind it, I think that could change the world.
I mean, Carl Jung said that in the early 20th century. If you work, he may have said it before, probably, and I'm not going to say it as elegantly, but if we each work on our own healing, we can heal the world. And the older I get, the more true I think that statement is. I have to understand we're connected, and the beauty of it is our diversity. The beauty is how different everyone is, how the different expression of life, just like in plant life or any kind of animal life. That's the beauty of it. I do believe just by being human, you can find common ground with other human beings. Are they different? Have they had different experiences than you? Yes. But we're human. So there's a certain commonality in all of that, that just by the fact of being alive. And it'd be nice if we could appreciate that more and put each other down less. Who knew this much was coming out of my book?
There is so much more. I'm still in the process of rereading it, but reading it the first time, I was just blown away. Everything was just like, oh my god, this is the most realistic shit I've ever read in my entire life. I absolutely loved it. And it's not just something I say just like that. I have been in 2 psych wards, dealt with a disorder that stems from severe trauma, dealt with abuse, and dealt with substance issues. This is it.
Yeah. I would take, I took students to the hospital a lot, and it was very scary, and the process is very scary. But usually the students came out being appreciative of the experience, like glad they actually went through and stayed because they were helped. So that's, it is a scary thing. There's no question about it, and that's why you want somebody who's caring to accompany you on that journey. We have to appreciate the work that mental health workers do, just like teachers and paramedics and kind of an invisible group of people out there helping teachers. You want loving, caring people doing those jobs, but they also have to make a living.
Yes. Those are all my questions. So unless you have anything else to add, that's it for me.
Well, I really appreciate, and what I appreciate was that you noticed that it was just a sliver in all of those people's lives. Like there's stories to tell. Like I'm thinking of my next book. If I'm writing, I'm not sure I'm going to follow through with it, but because I have ADHD, so I may not ever write it. I don't know, but I'm thinking of it, but I'm thinking of a different year, or 10 years down the line, same place, not at the hospital, but from a different perspective, but Dorothy will show up again. So it's like, where will she be,
That's literally what I asked. I want that.
Yeah. But I love that you noticed that, because it's true. That wasn't the beginning or the end of any of those character stories.
It definitely felt that way with all of them. It didn't just feel like, oh, we're being introduced to this character. This is their story. This is their arc, the plot, and this is how it ends. One of them is gone. One of them is better. Blah blah blah. It did not feel like that at all. Each and every one of them was made to perfection, I think. Like, yeah.
I really appreciate that. I wish you could see the smile on my face. Really appreciate it. It's been delightful talking with you, and I wish I could have figured out the the technology, but still, I really enjoyed this.
So,
Yeah, close enough.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for giving it a chance. I know it's your first time going live and trying to figure everything out. So thank you so much. Oh, so am I. Someone said they're excited for your next book, and so am I. Now you have to.
Awesome. And I may, now that I see what a close reader you are, if I do get a draft of another book down, I'll reach out to you so you can give me some feedback.
I would be honored, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You have a great week.
You too. Thank you so much for being here and for answering all of my questions. It's been absolutely amazing.
My pleasure. All right. Bye-bye.
I will leave in the description Michelle Tobin's book, the link where you can get the book, my TikTok where I try to have lives with authors that I like. And also Michelle Tobin's social media where you can support her and know more about her and about her incredible book. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. I love you. See you next video.